property is just the vehicle. You have to do the fundamentals right. Like if you get the cash flow wrong, your business will die. Time and experience and integrity is what makes somebody credible. The cream rises to the top, and those that don't really know what they're doing tend to fade away. What I would say is if you're flipping properties, you can't now just get away with £5 laminate flooring. And I think your finish is so important in you being able to actually be successful in this day and age as a property investor or developer.
What still excites you about property? Hi Black Circle family, and welcome back to another episode, and I am so pleased for our next guest who's joining us today in the circle. Today we're talking about property with property developer extraordinaire Kazeem Alli-Balogun, aka Kazy. Kazy is a developer with over 10 years in the industry, more than 40 deals under his belt, and experience raising over £1 million in private funding. From running a Shisha business in some of the UK's biggest venues to completing 8-figure deals, his journey has been anything but conventional. Welcome.
Thank you. That's a great intro.
Thank you. And we're talking about conventional, but your start was quite unconventional. So I know that you went to uni, went down that path, but then you decided to drop out. So what was the catalyst for such a big pivot?
Do you know what? So I did drop out, but also then went back.
Oh, okay.
But I went back more just from a place of, like mastermind. Like when it says you started, so you'll finish. Kind of, I had it in my head that just in case. Mm-hmm. And I think it definitely comes down to like my attitude towards risk, because it is such a generalization that you go to school, then you go to college, then you go to uni. Like, I don't think I had the guts, if I'm honest, like as an entrepreneur, to just be like, let me just put all my eggs in one basket into this entrepreneur stuff. In terms of dropping out, that was just from a case of like, if I didn't drop out, I would have been kicked out. Right. Like I wasn't really performing. I was struggling. If I'm mad honest, I was struggling. Like the work just seemed like really hard. Like it felt like it was harder for me than everybody else. And now, like realistically, in hindsight, that was just from a place of I was putting in less effort than everybody else. But I think it's really easy to make excuses and be like, I'm just not intelligent enough, or I'm just not maybe there yet, when actually it's more about how you apply yourself than your ability.
And I think there's something really interesting about environments as well. Not every environment is fostered for each individual child's kind of like academia. Some people learn in completely different models. And I think we've got this like blueprint, or I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, but it's basically like a standard template of how you should learn, which can be a bit stifling. And a lot of kids experience that.
Like, I was super grateful, like particularly to my mum, that like because I guess partially because my younger sister had a lot of like learning difficulties through having like a stroke, like she was really aware of the importance of like needing and asking for help. So where like early on, like this is sort of primary school, secondary school, they would say like Kaz is lazy or he has no attention span, she kind of pushed for like my testing to like be diagnosed as being like dyslexic and needing additional help early on. And I think like, it's why I say I'm so grateful, is like without that, like you said, in terms of different people, I would have really struggled to achieve in school, because I like my handwriting was barely legible. Like I did struggle with completing exams in time frames, but with the support and the extra time that I got from my school as a result of my mum pushing for it, it actually meant that I did do really well in school. And I did, off the back of doing well in like, first, whether SATs, then GCSEs, then whatever, I had a lot more belief in myself because I understood what I could do given the support that's required. And I think it's a massive reminder, whether it's for the kids or whether it's for people in work, that it's about the importance of asking for help and understanding that just because you can't do something maybe in a conventional way doesn't mean that you can't do it. You just need to find a way to pivot and navigate. And that's what's so good with, open AI and things like that. There's so much support you can get now that you can give yourself. I think there's so fewer excuses.
Absolutely. And I think just going back to your time at university and being like, I don't feel like it's serving me in the best way possible. I think now there's a lot of education around, okay, there's so many different avenues for you to be successful, for you to be an entrepreneur. It's not always looks like that academic road. So growing up, how did you see home ownership? And was it something you felt realistic to you?
Yeah, like, I think growing up, I wasn't one of these people. Like, I speak to people doing podcasts all the time. Like, the first thing, I wanted a house, and I knew I wanted a house. And it wasn't so much like the home ownership side of things, but I guess it was more the importance of hard work. So I'd seen my dad come as like first generation migrant to the UK, seen him working as a minicab driver in Brixton, and like being kind of African wasn't cool then, and wasn't like, you know, it was quite difficult for him whilst running, you know, a market stall, whilst trying to like, you know, get his qualifications. And I'd seen the difference of like where I grew up, like, you know, where everything was just, you know, secondhand clothes and what have you, and hand-me-downs, versus when he now benefited from the fruits of his labor and qualified as a solicitor, and then not only qualified but then started his own practice. And you know, I remember I don't even know why I was privy to this conversation, but when he started his own practice, he had a business partner. His business partner, still good guy, like, you know, like really really someone I look up to as well, but was white British, and they were like looking at going to get like their first premises. Mm-hmm. And they were saying, yeah, like, oh, like, where are we gonna rent? And I just remember my dad saying, and I always remembered my dad saying, no, we're African, we don't rent, we buy, we own.
Yes, yeah.
And like that mentality of, I think ownership is so important, because when you see the people that don't have that, and you see these stories about the person that had like their barbershop for 30 years in Peckham, and then the area got gentrified, and they never even, let alone ownership, they didn't even bother to like sign a lease. So the second the values went up, they were like, right, great, you've had a business here for 30 years, but no one cares. Mm. And now you got to start from scratch again. So I think the idea of the security from ownership was the thing that I really liked.
Absolutely. And it sounds like your dad was, he also was kind of had that hustle mentality from cab driver and market stall, and then finally going on to solicitors. I guess you seeing that and having that example would have been like your first early examples of entrepreneurship in your father.
Like, massively, like, you know. And I think a lot of people, like, don't get me wrong, like loads of people come from nothing, but I think it's so important to like pay homage to those that have, like, you know, I guess paved the way for us to be able to achieve the things that we're now able to achieve.
No, absolutely. And again, just touching on that topic of ownership and how important that is, and how I think we're more becoming aware of that, especially, as you said, technology is allowing us to learn more about that. So how did your early business experiences prepare you for property, even if it didn't look connected at the time?
Do you know what? Like, I'm on like two sides. Sometimes I think it didn't. Like some of the stress that's in property, nothing prepares you for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's so many similarities between business. Like, property is just the vehicle. You have to do the fundamentals right. Like, if you get the cash flow wrong, your business will die. Like, if you don't have the money to pay your builders, to pay your bridging fees, to pay all your fees, you end up going insolvent. It's the same thing as if you're running a hair salon. If you don't have the money to pay your rent and X, Y, or Z, or to pay your stylist, the business is going under. So I think basic business principles really helped. I think understanding as well, like that, like, for example, like the Shisha business that you touched on earlier is a massive people business, like, because it's a lifestyle, it's a social business, you engage with people, you have to build relationships. I think, you know, understanding that the majority of business is built around people. Like, most of the best deals I've got aren't because I'm the best property developer. It's maybe because I can be the most personable. It's maybe because you do what you say and people rely on you. And I think when people can rely on you, they trust you, you know, they respect you, that is what, you know, creates the luck and the opportunities that can allow for a successful business.
I want to just touch on the Shisha business a little bit, and where it went from Shisha to property. Like, how did you make that jump?
See, a lot of my life choices
Yeah.
come from me being stubborn.
Right.
Like a lot of my changes and just like, I'm not like, so like me leaving university was just like one day I was like, this is long. Like I didn't actually ever leave. I stayed at the uni, like still lived there, but just like I'm not going anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
like, well, I paid a bit, so I'm just
It's
gonna be
fine,
here.
yeah.
Made some friends. But yeah, so the shisha business, I think I was fortunate enough that we kind of were in the business on the ascendancy of shisha in terms of it was getting a lot more popular. Prices are really low in terms of the acquisition for the stock, but what you could sell it for, so the margins were really good. Scaled the business from, kind of just a pop-up at events to having a full-time venue, made a decent amount of money, and the money was good. But I think it was the idea of the money was good that we made. I was able to save like, probably just under six figures from a business, which is really good at early 20s.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
But I was very conscious like how hard I was. When I say hard, I mean like I had black lungs. Like I'm starting like 100 shisha pipes a day and stuff. Like,
No.
I'm
So
the shisha.
You were smoking the product.
I'm the shisha. No, but like because I have to like you have to start it for the like I'm the shisha man.
Oh,
I'm the
okay.
shisha man, the barman, the security man, the
Right.
accountant, the administrator, the marketer. Like, but when you start a business, you are. But I think it's like I was there early, like, not early, never, but I was there early, having to like close up, having to like take stock home, stock back, wash the shisha pipes, and I was very involved in the business because it's a cash business. So you have to be, and you like when you're starting out, I think the success of your business like is really going to be down to the founder, and whether that be a tech startup with a person that's got a great idea and a great culture, or somebody that's running a bar or a restaurant, like people. The Shisha lounge was like a pub. Well, it was a pub. Technically, it's been converted to a Shisha lounge, but it was the idea that people came because they felt it was their home. They felt it was their local. And if I wasn't there to build the rapport and meet the customers, so I did feel very much like whilst I ran a business, I was definitely working for the money. It was like late nights, early mornings. And I think I just thought to myself, you know what, like there needs to be something else. As an entrepreneur, I want to find a better like work-life balance. Funny story, it got better and then got a lot worse, the work-life balance.
Right.
So like you went from like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do one project here and there to scaling to having no time whatsoever and, like working 80 hours a week. But I guess I'd always been interested in the idea of property. I'd heard like, great stories about the money that people make. And I think it's one of those things like when you hear a story and you're like, doesn't sound that hard. Like I've watched Homes Under the Hammer. I can do this.
Right. So you've made the pivot now. And so we started in Shisha around your 20s. Was it the same time that you went into property, or was there a gap, or how long did you continue down that path?
Yes, I probably started Shisha in like my early 20s. Did it for around 2 years. I think I bought my first property when I was 23.
Okay, so we're still in our 20s at the time of getting into property.
Yeah. So like, said I've been in property for a long time. You make me sound 45 now.
No, not at all, not at all. But I'm trying to
like
see,
gauge.
the
Okay,
journey.
so like so my like in terms of time frames, it was like school, finished at 16, went to college, did an extra year. So like I'm 19 by the time I went to uni. Went to uni, did like 2 years at uni, then dropped out. So I'm like 21. But whilst doing that, I'm doing the shisha. Probably like 23 odd is when I'm doing everything because I'm getting into property. I'm closing down the shisha. Plus I'm going back to uni as well. Okay. Like going back to the other uni. So it's like I've got a lot going on. And I think it was just a case of something's got to give. So the first property I bought was off the back of the savings from the shisha business, and was able to pivot into that and kind of have my first foray into the property space.
I want to switch gear a little bit now and talk about building credibility before capital. So what makes someone credible in property, and who gets to decide that?
Oof, this is a question. This is a good question because unfortunately not so much the property space, but I guess property running parallel to education,
right,
is a bit murky, and there's a lot of people. I name them, but people know who they are that like don't do what they say they do, haven't done it for as long as they say they have, haven't made the money they said they have. So what makes people credible, I guess, is time in the business, experience. Like, you can't do your first deal and then start claiming to be a guru or an expert or, master of all. I also just think, I guess, personal reputation and integrity. Like, do you actually deliver on what you say you do? Like, how many times have you done it? Have you done it in a good market and a bad market? Because anybody can make money buying and selling property when the market's flying. Because even if you do a really bad, like, create a really bad product, the market drags you along and you still make a little bit of money.
Right.
So I'd say, time and experience and integrity is what makes somebody credible. If you're looking, for somebody to maybe get direction from, I guess, like, now there's a lot more information available on Companies House, so you can get that in terms of credibility. You obviously also get, like, personal recommendations of people who've worked with them or for them or around them in the past. But then over time, I think, the cream rises to the top, and those that don't really know what they're doing tend to fade away, and you can sort of see between the cracks of where stuff isn't really adding up.
And I'm just thinking, as you're talking, do you think that there are gatekeepers that exist in these spaces?
Yeah, like, there's always gatekeepers. Like, I've dealt with people that I don't think they're directly gatekeepers. They just don't have an abundant mindset. Like, they're so scared that if they tell other people what they're doing, then there'll be no opportunities left for them. But like to tell, like, a little story. So, like, because I was so conscious that maybe when I wanted to get into the industry, there wasn't a lot of people that maybe looked like me or sounded like me that had a voice to inspire people like me to get into it, which is why I created the PBK community. And I very easily probably could have, sold a course, like, here's how you do it. But I think the reality is I wanted to create something that was what I would have wanted starting out. Like, so what are the tools that you need and how do you deliver? And as an active learner, like, how can you go down to site and see how it works and meet with the builders and the architects and the structural engineers and ask all the questions that sound silly but actually are really important, because we all have no idea because nobody's taught it in school. So then we built that out. And I think, to answer your question about, like, gatekeeping, it's like, so I bought a property last year over in West London, and I could have looked at it and it was a profitable deal. Like, I think it made 150k in profit, like, on exit. And I knew that from going into it. And I could have looked at that and said, oh, this is a really good deal. Let me not tell anybody about this sort of area. But because I did share the deal and had members of the PBK community come down, since that day, like, my members have bought, I think, another 12 properties, 3 on the same road, 2 on the road parallel, 1 on the road adjacent, and a load of others, like, in 0.1 square miles. And they've been buying these properties for the same price, doing, like, the same model of a rear extension, adding value. And I think, like, to date, probably bought just shy of maybe around that area, £4.5 million worth of property that's probably going to be worth, in the region of maybe 9 point something million in terms of value. So in terms of added value. But I could have looked at that. I tell that story not to say, like, oh, look at what everybody's doing and here are the numbers. But realistically, I could have looked at it and said, all those deals are just going to be mine. But there's only a certain capacity that you're going to have. And off the back of them doing those deals, we now have better relationships with the agents, better relationships with the funders, better relationships with the auction houses. So when I now want to get my next opportunity, we can leverage our collective buying power, which I think is things that you see in a lot of different communities, and they do maybe a lot better than some of the Black and ethnic minority communities.
And it's interesting that you bring that point up about the different communities. But just going through, like, your socials, I think you do a really good job of, like, demystifying things and being very transparent about the process, which goes a long way to kind of break down those gatekeeping barriers. So what do people misunderstand about how relationships work in property? And I know you're talking about building, we're talking about credibility and being personable and ethics, but
yeah, my stuff's always going to be story related. So it's like, I think a lot of people, like, they watch, like, they watch all of the life coaching stuff and all the films about the amazing business people and think you've got to be, like, this super cutthroat, ruthless business person that can negotiate everything and get something that's supposed to be £100 down to like £50 every time. But like I think one of the misconceptions is that like you can negotiate yourself out of a good deal, and you can like, you know, like win the negotiation and still lose the war. So for example, I had like one of my members, and like they're going back and forth with like one of their co-freeholders, and like they were really trying to sort of squeeze them for everything to pay them like the smallest amount possible. But then I was in my head, I was like, look, just like pay a reasonable amount and just get in and get out and make your money. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that people do is a lot of the time they try and over negotiate because they're trying to be too protective of their own interests without actually thinking that in most cases, like there needs to be a bit of give and take. Because in that example, that person has now gone back. They probably would have maybe settled at like 20,000, which is still a really good price. Somebody's trying to only pay them 10,000. Now they've sought independent legal advice, and they're probably looking at maybe having to pay £80,000. So over trying to be too greedy, they've cost themselves a lot of money. People do it sometimes with estate agents, and it's like they want to negotiate the fee down to the wire, to the point that, you know, the agent isn't really incentivized to sell that specific property. So if I gave you an example, if you were selling your flat and they valued your flat at £500,000, and they said, oh, our fee's 2%. But you were like, no, I'm not doing this, and I'm that, and you got them down to like 1%. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, they might still take the listing on. But if they've got two flats that are around the corner from each other, and they're taking out Joe Blogs to both of these flats, and they like both of them, but your one's on a 1% fee and somebody else is on a 2% fee, and they're asking that expert that you've employed to advise the buyer, where do you think they're going to push that person to? So then when your flat now maybe sells for £30,000-40,000 less than the one down the road, a lot of the time it's because you tried to save money when actually it cost you in the long term. And I think just finding that negotiation balance in business is really important, that there needs to be an element of win-win for it to work in the long term.
Yes, yeah. No, absolutely. Hi, Black Circle family. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. It would really mean the world to me if you could take 2 seconds just to like, follow, subscribe and share, and really help me to build this community and keep the conversation going. Thank you. So was there a moment when you realised your network had become just as valuable as capital?
Yeah. Like just so there was a time when somebody presented me a really good opportunity. It was a house that was a repossession. They were like, look, we're going to auction if we don't get a buyer. I think I had like, I want to say just under 72 hours to basically to decide and exchange on this property, which meant I needed circa maybe £250,000. It was just under that, £240,000 that I needed to be able to proceed with it. And it was a really good deal, a lot of money in it. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, but this sale's not going to go through in time, and don't liquidly have the money. But I think I just put like a post on Instagram to be like, oh, by the way, I've got an opportunity, and I think raised the money in like 24 hours.
It's incredible. Yeah.
And it was because of like, but the reason that it answers your question around network is the person who reached out to me didn't even see the post. They didn't even follow me, but it was off the back of somebody who I had engaged with and done business with in the past was like, oh, this person's really credible. You're looking for somewhere to place your funds. I think there'd be good synergy there. Mm-hmm. So off the back of a personal recommendation from somebody I'd done business with in the past, we're able to go ahead and do a deal that ended up, being, I think the GDV of that project was just maybe like just under 1.3, maybe 1.4 million. I can't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm. So again, it links back to that idea of credibility as well, and building up your network with your credibility. So I mentioned in the intro that, it's been 10 years in the game now. So after 10 years in the game, what still excites you about property?
Do you know what? I'm like, I genuinely, like, and that was the same thing with Shisha. Like, I'm in it for the love of the game. Yeah. Like, the money is cool, and this isn't even from a place of like, oh, I've got like loads of money, but it's like, I don't love money. So it's like, as long as like I've got things that I like my paddle, I like my gym, I like whatever. Like,
so you like skiing as well?
Yeah. Skiing, going skiing in like 3 weeks, going to Bulgaria.
Nice.
We got off-piste ski around the black ski trip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
There's a black ski trip. I love that.
yeah. Big up off-piste. But yeah, I'm going with them. I went last year, had a sick time. But like, yeah, where I can do things that I like, I don't really get too caught up in the money. But I genuinely do still like that idea of that transformation, like that idea of taking something that looks run down, that people kind of look past and being like, nah, trust me, like this one. And just that little feedback of like, even when I take like my friends around or the agents come and they're just like, nah, this one's even better. This one's good. Like, I'm still buzzing for that. I still really love as well. It's like, I guess it's almost like the thrill of the chasing property in terms of looking for that next opportunity. And so that's why like I don't mind using deal sources, don't get me wrong. Everyone likes an easy life. But when like you can find that deal that like I'm just scouring through Rightmove or Zoopla or the auction catalogs, and I can find that deal that everybody's discounted and you're like, you see something that everybody else has missed. It's like, that's when you get that kind of nice feeling. Like I can still, I've still got this. I've still got this in the locker.
There was one of your stories on Instagram, and forgive me if I don't get all the details correct, but I think it was basically you was going to lose money on the deal, and then what ended up happening is you guys flipped it into an Airbnb, and because it was by the Chelsea football grounds, you guys were raking in the money. So it wasn't going to turn into like selling it as a house, but you turned it into an Airbnb. So I thought like things like that, when you talk about transformation and pivoting, I thought that was such a good...
And I think that was like, and that was important for me to share because technically, like, and it depends how you look at it, cup half full, half empty, but technically that was the first deal in like 13 years or the only deal in 13 years that I would have lost money on. If I would have just stuck on they still didn't go to plan, we've lost money, that's it, just sell it at a loss. But I think obviously also having more time in the game and having the ability to keep some money in the deal meant that we could pivot, go over to the Airbnb model. It's now doing really well. It's going from strength to strength, like you said, being near Stamford Bridge, being near Craven Cottage. Like, so the big like sort of Southwest London football stadiums means that demand's really high. Every weekend, like weekdays sometimes, and then on top of that, just it's in a great location in general. But I think as a business concept, the ability to pivot is so important. Like, business is constantly adapting and changing, particularly the property market. People are always going to tell you, oh, but this is happening right now and X is happening right now, and there's going to be so many social commentators right now that like they feed off the doom and gloom of nothing will work, because people love that on the internet. But it's about pivoting, and every time there's a problem, it just presents an opportunity.
Yeah, and I just loved, I wanted to highlight that because I just thought it was so clever of a pivot. So what was the deal that looked good on paper but taught you the hardest lesson?
Do you know what? Like, there's always a lot of lessons, like, but I think it's important to try where possible to see them as lessons over losses. I mean, there was the deal that never actually transpired. So there was a time I was buying this 3-bedroom flat above a commercial unit in SE20. It was a really good price point. It arranged like a good deal, like with the vendor, but I think I fell foul to what I spoke about earlier, like trying to over negotiate. So because I knew there were issues and I knew the vendor like had a bit of like pressure to sell, I'm saying, well, I'm not doing this until you do this, I'm not doing that until you did this. So I'd paid for my like architectural drawings. I think I'd submitted planning to convert it, because we're going to convert it to a HMO. So for those that are not familiar, that's like a house share. So from a C3 to C4, because it was in an Article 4 area, which means they've removed the permitted development rights. Had paid for that. We're kind of dragging my feet a little bit just because I was like, oh yeah, I had other stuff going on. And then the day that we was like, okay, do you know what, we're going to go and exchange, or like the couple days before, just got a message from the other side solicitor to being like, oh no, our client put that in auction, he sold it already. And it's like, so had spent a load of money, a load of time, had committed funds that we couldn't proceed with. And I think that the lessons from that were just very much a case of like, don't count your chickens before they've hatched, but also like, don't be overly complacent that like a deal is just yours. Like, nothing's done until the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and you've exchanged and you've got that over the line. So I think going forward, I'm a lot more bullish with the way I structure deals now.
I know earlier we touched on transparency and ethics. I want to dive into that a little bit more. You've built such a great community, and we spoke about that online, and you're very open about your process. So why is transparency important to you?
I just think there is so much like white noise and fuzz on the internet that like it's important to be transparent and be like authentically yourself. But I think also like from a credibility perspective, we're very aware of like credit history. We're very aware of, okay, if you don't pay your bills, like with EDF, then you get a mark on your credit and then your cost of finance gets more expensive, or somebody actually won't give you finance. But I think we need to be taking that example and using it to your real life credit. Like if you tell somebody you're going to turn up at a certain time and you don't turn up, like you lose a little bit of that credibility. You become a little bit less reliable. So that may mean that they don't invite you to the event again, or if they do, they tell you a time that's way earlier, and then now you're wasting your time. So I think acting in a credible manner and with integrity is integral to getting the best out of your business and the best out of yourself.
And you've been quoted in the Telegraph to say, my priorities are people's homes. The Renters Reform Bill is fair. And that was back in 2023. So do you think the industry struggles because too many people forget that human element of it all?
Do I think? It's a good question. That's good. I see. Look, I was bang on. I said the Renters Reform Bill was fair in 2023.
Yeah, you did.
Fast forward 2026, May 1st, it's becoming statute law.
Yeah.
So it's coming into effect. And I still think it's pretty fair. I think there's some mistakes that have been made in it, but I think it's pretty fair. I think from a landlord perspective, yes, there are some like bad or worse landlords that I think don't equate tenants to customers, and they think tenants are by like some way different in that the customer doesn't come first. If you have a tenant as a landlord, they are your customer. Like you need to provide a high level of customer service because ultimately they're paying you a significant amount of sum, probably their most expensive monthly regular payment. That being said, I also do think, a lot of landlords and property investors and owners get a lot of stick for things that are not really their problem. So I saw like somebody, like one of these social commentators the other day, put like a thing out saying, I've just seen like this, like 60 new homes are being built in this area in Stoke, but actually none of them are going to be for sale. They're all going to be built for rent. And I was like, well, if that's the model that makes sense in the economy, you got two choices. Either the developer doesn't build them and there's no new homes, there's no jobs in the area that are going to be added by those homes being built. There's no, like, local businesses are not going to get the infrastructure from those homes being built. Or the developer builds them and you add stock to the rental market. It's like, if you buy a property and rent it out, you're a bad landlord. If you buy a property and flip it, but somebody else could have bought it. But on the other side, sometimes we buy properties that have been derelict and run down for 20 years and not been lived in and not been used. But somehow you're still the bad guy or girl.
Yeah, but there is a massive problem with housing, though. And I know that's like a whole, we could do a whole other episode on that. But how can we make it a little bit more fair? Because, like you're saying, renting, you can be spending way more than somebody who's got a mortgage, and you're paying somebody else's mortgage, or there's not enough stock, as you're saying, or people are investing and leaving properties empty. So there is a huge problem there.
I think generally speaking, like I think there is a misconception, like in terms of what percentage of the market is owned by like buy-to-let landlords, like private buy-to-let landlords. It's a lot lower than most people think.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the number, but I'm sure we can get it like right here somewhere in post. The other side of it is that landlords have no incentive to leave properties empty. Like if you go and spend like hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds on a property, it's to make money back, and to make money back, that property needs to be occupied. So as a landlord, some people, like, we live in a culture in the UK where most people do want to own their own home at some point. but some people don't. Like there's a lot of people that have moved over to the Uber model that if I can rent it, why would I bother owning it? Like, and they just don't want to. So they serve a purpose. The gap between the rental price versus, the mortgage with interest rates where they are isn't massive. It's still cheaper to own than it is to rent, but obviously also you have to put in a lot more money up front with your deposit. I think if we were to look at where things could be improved, it would definitely be on the supply side. But, when we look at the supply side comes from, okay, firstly, how can you streamline the planning sector to make it more attractive to deliver more houses? How can you make builds like more feasible, obviously long-term, like long-term sustainable, more ecological? But then how can we also deliver, like what infrastructure do we have to deliver those properties? So like at the moment, like I was looking for a friend who wanted to get their son wanted to get into property, and they were looking at potentially doing like some type of internship or apprenticeship. And in the whole of Greater London, there were 3 apprenticeships across gas and like central heating, 3 apprenticeships in electrical engineering or like gas and plumbing.
Yeah, 3.
3 across 2 massive vocations. So if you want to build more homes, you need a more skilled labour force from that sector. Post-Brexit, we saw a mass exodus in skilled labour in that space. Also off the back of like certain like geopolitical pressures, materials have gotten a lot more expensive, which means for people want to build houses. Like construction companies want to build homes, like home building companies want to build homes, but they need to make a profit because it needs to be viable. And I think unless they're going to be massively subsidized by the government, which isn't viable, the prices are going to be where they are unless there's give in any of those spaces.
So with changes like the Renters Reform Bill, what do you think a fair and sustainable property industry actually looks like?
Like I think look, we've probably got prices have gone up, but in terms of like as a market, there's a reason why we get a lot of like foreign investment into the UK property market is because it is very sustainable. Like you kind of know roughly where you're at in terms of prices. Yes, there has been, recessions, but they're few and far between in terms of, I guess, other economies. So the Renters Reform Act is good in terms of, I guess, creating more of a level playing field between renters and homeowners. So effectively what they've done is removed the so tenancies are no longer going to be ASTs, like they're no longer going to be assured short hold tenancies. They're just going to be assured tenancies, which effectively means any tenancy is a tenancy for life, and you can only evict under certain parameters now, which effectively would be if you're going to move into the property yourself or a relative is. There's no more non-fault evictions. So Section 21 evictions have been removed, which I think is good for like people that, it means you've got security. If you're raising a family near proximity to your school, that you're a lot more likely to be able to be there indefinitely. I think one thing that I think would be really good, and I know it's kind of been implemented, but I think should be more standardized, is particularly where you touched on it earlier, that a lot of people are paying more in rent than they'd be paying for a mortgage. I think if that, whereas they may not have the money for the deposit, and that's what's stopping them getting on the housing ladder. But I think, people credit linking their rental payments. And if you can show a track record that you've, paid your rent for the last 3 years without issue at a higher amount, and allowing that to be your credit history to then go and borrow and get, on the credit, get on the property ladder, I think that would be beneficial. It's hard because there are things that a lot of people would like 100% loans on mortgages. But the reality is that was kind of partly what caused the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, because it's over leverage. And if you've got no skin in the game, it's like, well, just take a mortgage. Like, why not? So I think having a deposit is, whilst it is a barrier to entry, it's a barrier to entry that's probably there for good reason.
Absolutely. I think maybe finding a middle ground for the climate that we're in for now, which is a little segue into present day 2026. And, the property game today is very different to when it was 10 years or 20 years ago. So what has fundamentally changed?
Do you know what's so crazy is like over the last 10 years, if I look at the deal I did 13 years ago versus the deal I did like last year or this year now, I should say, they were the same types of deals. Like bill costs have got more expensive. Estate agents have gone full circle. They went from being really important to not that important to probably in this market quite important again. Cost of finance in terms of where it was then to now has probably re-leveled and is back in about the same place. So I think if you asked me this question like 5 years ago, it'd be super different. But like now, things have kind of gone back to where they were when I first started.
Interesting. Okay.
Like planning laws have probably laxed a little bit, making it a bit easier again to get planning. So I think a lot of things do go full circle and are very, very cyclical. If I was looking at the market as it is now, things were quite doom and gloom last year. If you follow the market, they were saying, which is true, like central London, so zone 1 probably saw the biggest fall off that is seen in recent times in terms of history. And it's not recovered by any means, but I think they were saying like, there was definitely a lot more properties coming to market like this month. I've seen the stock that I've sold has been selling pretty quickly. So I'd say the market seems to be quite healthy. I think what I would say is if you're flipping properties, you can't now just get away with basic £5 laminate flooring, magnolia walls, and the basic landlord kitchen with the bar handles. Like those days have long gone. Like whether it's independent developers or the big boys, like they're putting a lot more attention to detail into the Instagrammable house.
Yes.
And I think your finish is so important in you being able to actually be successful in this day and age as a property investor or developer.
Everybody wants that modern aesthetic, don't they? And that, as you said, that nice finish. Yeah. In a tighter economy, how can people get more creative in how they enter the market? Yeah,
so I think like the more difficult the market is, a lot of the time the more opportunity you have, because in a difficult market there are going to be people, unfortunately, with more pressure to sell. So there are things that, whether it's like, a lease option agreement, which aren't the easiest to agree, but you can do things like lease options. You can do things like assisted sales, which is effectively, imagine there was a property that had been sitting online for a while in a really bad condition. You could offer them an opportunity where effectively you partner with them to renovate their property. You take responsibility for all of the bills and the overheads, and then you then sell and split the profits. They keep their money with what they wanted for the house. You then get as a sort of secondary amount the money you put in, and then you share the uplift in value based on what that is. I think obviously through information and expertise, even those that maybe didn't necessarily understand property or didn't have a background in it, there's so much information out there now as well that you can just do that deep dive into YouTube or TikTok or wherever it is that you like to consume your information from, and then get into some of the, I guess, lower barrier to entry strategies, whether that be like serviced accommodation or deal sourcing or property management, to build your network, to build your net worth, but also I guess build your confidence for when you want to maybe get into the ownership side of things as well.
If you were starting from scratch in 2026 with no portfolio, what would you focus on first?
I always answer this question. One day my answer is going to change, but right now I say like, and it's funny because it's probably the one strategy that I've never done. Maybe it's just because I'm interested, but if I was starting from scratch now, it'd have to be deal sourcing.
Right.
Reason being is you can make cash quickly, you gain really good expertise for things that you want to do in the long term, and you also then are aligning yourself with the people. You're selling deals to the people that you want to be like. So, for example, if you can work out the skill set of how to appraise a good deal, how to spot an opportunity, the startup costs are relatively low. You need like a good contract to protect yourself. And then after that, you could be selling these opportunities for anywhere from £2,000 to £10,000 a pop. So if you take a middle ground of £5,000, if you could sell 2 a month, you could make £10,000 a month. By the end of the year, you could have your money for your first project, but also have a black book of investors that are looking for similar projects that maybe rather than you just sell them the opportunity, now they want to partner with you or give you an equity like within that project as well.
And just before we close, what's next?
There's so much. There's so much. Do you know what it is? Yeah, I'm someone that every day I've got like a new plan, like a new idea. Like so I even had like a new idea on the way here.
Nice, okay.
Which I can't talk about yet. No. But yeah, like I'm gonna continue pushing with the PBK community because the guys and girls, they're absolutely like, you know, they're smashing it. I need to run the numbers again, but I know like, you know, sort of hundreds of projects now that we've completed as a community, which means, you know, millions and million probably. We're not at the £100 million mark yet, but, you know, pushing towards that in terms of numbers as a collective. So I think growing that as a footprint to show what is achievable when people come together and share advice, share experience, share expertise, I think it is important. So continue to grow the PBK community over the next sort of 24 months. Got some good stuff coming out, so that we're going to be working with like the UK Black Business Show again for 2026. I guess maybe a little bit more speaking pop up every now and again on your screens and in person. But then also just enjoy life as well. So
bit of skiing,
bit of paddle. Yeah. Got some gonna do some like property and paddle tournaments. Maybe do a little prop ski getaway, and just find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds very hectic but fun at the same time. So at this point, I like to do a thing called the full circle, and it's basically reflection. So if you could share one piece of advice either to your younger self or your future self, what would it be?
I always see when I get asked these questions, I'm always like, oh, I've got to say something like super wise.
It doesn't have to be.
No, but it does. You're supposed to say something like super wise and introspective and make people say, yeah, this man knows what he's talking about. But I think for my younger self, I would just say to enjoy the journey, because like the journey is honestly like is probably the best part. Like there's no actual real thing as a destination, like unless you've got one specific thing that you want. Like there's no, and even when you get there, you want something else. So you have to remember to stop and smell the roses and actually enjoying the process. To my future self, I think it's probably the same message, because like we're constantly in this like, you know, spinning plates, and I think to myself now, I would remind you that you have to be willing. Like if you want growth, like it sounds counterintuitive, but you have to be willing to let go. You have to be willing to delegate. You have to be willing to bring people on board. You have to be willing to make less money to make more money or have more success in the long term.
Love that. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us here. If people want to follow your journey, how can they find you?
So you find me at Property by Kazy on Instagram, Property by Kazy on YouTube, or PBK Community on Instagram as well. And then Kazeem Alli-Balogun on LinkedIn.
Love it. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you once more for joining us. And if you want to find us and follow the Black Circle's journey, we are on the Black Circle podcast across all socials. Thank you.